Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we are diving deep into a really core part of your GCSE computer science course, the architecture of the CPU. Now, I know this topic can feel a bit heavy with all the acronyms and components, but trust me, by the end of this, you'll see it's just a few key parts working together in a really simple logical loop. You ready? Let's get into it. So, to get us started, let's ask a really big question. We all use computers every single day, right? But have you ever actually stopped to wonder how they think? You know, how does clicking your mouse or tapping a key actually turn into launching an app or loading up a website? Well, the answer to all of that lies inside one tiny but incredibly powerful component.
And yeah, you guessed it. That component is the Central Processing Unit, or CPU. You've almost definitely heard it called the brain of the computer. And honestly, that's the perfect way to think about it. Its entire purpose in life is to process instructions. That's it. Every single thing your computer does, from booting up to running your favorite game, is because the CPU is working away running the program. It really is the engine that drives everything.
So how on earth does it manage all of that? Well, the CPU's main job actually boils down to one single, continuous, and unbelievably fast process. It's called the fetch-execute cycle. You can think of this cycle as the very heartbeat of your computer. And understanding this one cycle is the absolute key to understanding the CPU itself.
So here's the plan for this explainer. We've just touched on what the CPU is. Next, we're going to look at the blueprint that most computers are based on. That's the von Neumann architecture. Then we'll break down the CPU's most important components, see how they all work together in that fetch-execute cycle, and then we'll wrap it all up with a super focused checklist to get you totally prepped for your exams.
All right, let's start with that blueprint. Pretty much every computer you will ever use is based on something called the von Neumann architecture. It's a design where the program instructions, the list of things to do, and the data that those instructions need are both stored in the same memory. This simple but really powerful idea is fundamental to how everything works.
Okay, so inside the CPU itself, there are these tiny, super fast memory spots called registers. Think of them like the CPU's own personal workbench, holding the exact bits of information it needs right at that very second. For your GCSE, there are 4 main ones you absolutely have to know. So let's break them down one by one.
First up, we have the program counter, or PC. Its job is super simple but absolutely crucial. It just holds the memory address of the next instruction the CPU needs to run. It's like a bookmark in a cookbook. It's always pointing to the next step so that our chef, the CPU, never loses its place.
Next, we've got the memory address register, or MAR. So once the program counter figures out the location of the next instruction, it passes that address over to the MAR. The MAR's job is to hold on to that specific memory address that the CPU needs to look at, whether it's to grab an instruction or to save some data. It's basically the exact postcode for what the CPU needs next.
So if the MAR is holding the postcode, what about the actual letter or package? Well, that's where the memory data register, or MDR, comes in. It acts as a kind of temporary waiting room for the actual data or the actual instruction that's just been picked up from an address or is waiting to be sent to one. So MAR has the address, MDR has the stuff.
And finally, for our registers, we have the accumulator. This one's a bit special. It's like the CPU's personal notepad or scratch pad. When another part of the CPU, the arithmetic logic unit, which we're going to meet in a sec, does a calculation, like 5 plus 3, the answer, 8, gets stored right here in the accumulator. Okay, so those were the registers, the CPU's super fast short-term memory. Now, let's meet the main workers inside the CPU that actually use all that information to get things done. There are 2 big ones you need to know.
And these 2 workers are the control unit, or CU, and the arithmetic logic unit, or ALU. So think of the control unit as the traffic cop or the manager of the whole operation. It doesn't actually do any of the math. Instead, it reads the instructions and directs the flow of data, telling everyone else what to do and when to do it. The ALU, on the other hand, that's the master calculator. It is the brainiac that handles all the math, addition, subtraction, you name it, and all the logical decisions, like checking if one number is bigger than another.
There is one other component that's worth knowing about: cache. Okay, imagine you're a librarian, and people keep asking for the same really popular book over and over. Instead of walking all the way back to the main shelves every single time, you'd probably just keep a few copies right there on your desk, wouldn't you? That is exactly what cache is. It's a small bit of super fast memory right on the CPU that stores the data and instructions that are used all the time. It's way, way faster to get stuff from the cache than from the main memory or RAM, and that's a huge reason why modern computers are so fast.
And that brings us to the main event. We've met all the individual players now. We've got the registers, the CPU, the ALU, and the cache. So now we get to see how they all work together in perfect harmony in that fundamental process we talked about at the start, the fetch-execute cycle.
This whole cycle has 3 core stages, and your CPU repeats this loop millions, sometimes billions of times every single second. It's wild. Those stages are fetch, decode, and execute. Let's look at exactly what happens in each one.
So the first stage is fetch. And as the name kind of gives away, the CPU's job here is to get, or fetch, the very next instruction it needs to process from the main memory. This is where those registers we just learned about all team up to find the exact location of that instruction and pull it into the CPU.
Next up is decode. So the instruction that we just fetched gets handed over to the control unit. And just like a director reading a line from a script, the CU's job is to interpret or decode what this instruction actually means. Is it a math problem? Does it mean we have to move some data around? The CU figures all that out and gets the right components ready for action.
And finally, we have execute. This is where the magic happens. The instruction is now carried out by whichever part of the CPU is needed. So if it was a math problem, the ALU would jump in and do the calculation. This is the part of the cycle where the actual work gets done. And as soon as it's over, the whole thing starts right back at fetch for the next instruction, all in a tiny fraction of a second.
Okay, let's switch gears a bit and get into some proper, focused revision. Everything we've covered is pulled directly from the GCSE specification, specifically OCR's J277. So let's boil it all down. What do you actually need to have locked in for your exam?
This table right here is your ultimate cheat sheet. Now pay close attention to that last column. The program counter and the MAR both store addresses. They are all about location. But the MDR, the accumulator, and the cache, they hold the actual stuff, the data or the instructions themselves. And of course, the CU and the ALU don't store anything. They're the doers, the manager, and the calculator. Knowing the specific job of each part, and whether it holds an address or data, is absolutely crucial.
So, this is it. This is your final exam checklist. I'd seriously recommend pausing here and asking yourself honestly, can you do all of these things? Can you explain what the CPU is for? Can you walk someone through the 3 stages of the fetch-execute cycle? Can you explain the roles of the CU, ALU, and all those registers we talked about? And, that really important one, do you know the difference between a component that stores data and one that stores an address? If you can confidently tick all of these boxes, you are in a brilliant place for this part of your exam.
And I'll leave you with one last thought. We started this off by calling the CPU the brain. Well, if that's true, could you think of the CU, the ALU, and all those registers as being like individual neurons? You know, each one has a very small, very specific job, but when they all fire together in that perfectly timed cycle, they create something incredibly powerful and complex. It's a pretty cool way to think about it. Thanks for joining me for this one, and seriously, best of luck with your revision.